maybe July to September, you're really narrowing down like
I've hopefully by then found my buck that I want to chase. I'm watching him, as many occasions as I can that I feel like it's necessary, and then kind of making a plan from there. And then knowing that come season, there will be adjustments that have to be made, but having as much information about that deer as possible can only benefit me. Right? Like knowing where, if he gets bumped, say you watch him get bumped by a hiker or something like that, where does he go? Which way does he run? Which way does he walk on what wind? Those are all important things I'm looking at. Where does he bed on certain winds in the summertime? Because I can then make those adjustments for the changing wind or how he gets pushed in season to kill him. So that's why I think it's important. It's not just about finding a deer, but it's about finding those little things about that specific deer that are going to give you the edge.
Ready to have some fun?
I'm Hunter Hogan, and welcome to Painting Public.
Let's do it.
Oh my god. Dude, this deer's a giant. Why we're calling it Painting Public is, from start to finish, from an open canvas.
This is where you begin to create the lay of the land.
Approaching a brand new state, approaching a brand new property, all the way down to the very finest detail. We're going to cover how that whole picture gets painted and how it's truly an art. Whether you have a good hunt, a bad hunt, nothing is an actual mistake in this process.
We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
Every hunt is very, very important. Every hunt is another brushstroke that's closer to the finished product. Tune in, Painting Public with Trophyline.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the first episode of a series we're going to be calling Painting Public. This is a special podcast series brought to you by Trophyline, and it is very specific and gauged towards hunting mature whitetail bucks, more specifically mobile hunting mature whitetail bucks on public land. Kind of the idea behind the name of Painting Public is we're going to paint the whole picture of what it looks like to go through my process and go through my small group of friends process and how we approach mature whitetail bucks the same way and different ways depending on where about in the nation and different states and different situations that we're presented with. So we're super excited to embark into this 10 episode podcast, and hopefully we can pick up some momentum and bring it even further and further. If we get the right kind of engagement, get the right kind of questions, maybe we can continue to keep making episodes and keep making more topics that we're going to go over. So this episode specifically, I'm kind of going to go over an overview of what all 10 topics are going to be and kind of what our mindset going into those as far as what we want to discuss and kind of where we're going with it. And then also I'm going to talk about each of my 3 guests that I'm going to be bringing into different podcasts based on each topic and kind of their history and why I feel that they were the best fit for bringing them onto these mature public land whitetail podcasts. So that being said, let's get into some topics. The first topic we're going to talk about is going to be preparation versus execution. And what I mean by preparation versus execution is, I see a lot of bow hunters getting caught up in their preparation mode. They're constantly buying all the new gear, buying all the new bows, all the new arrows, all the new mobile hunting setups and camouflage cameras, and all that is awesome. It's great tools, but they get caught up in that mode. They get stuck in that mode and they don't spend much time in the field or actually hunting. And I think it's pretty easy to get sucked into that realm of things because there's a very strong social aspect to that preparation mode. There's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of trade shows. There's a lot of hanging out at the bow shop and talking about game plans and stuff like that. And I love that part of our industry and that camaraderie in it. Also, I think there's a lot of people that don't achieve the goals that they set for themselves in the woods and in the hunting world because they get stuck in this preparation mode. So there's a proper amount of preparation. then there's a proper amount of field work and being in the field. And on the other hand, there's two extremes to everything. The other extreme is, maybe someone doesn't do much preparation. They don't shoot their bow much. They don't practice their mobile hunting gear much. They don't have a game plan on scouting or maps or the property that they're going to be hunting. Even if that's private land, they don't spend any time, prepping for season before it's actually here. And a lot of those people are, maybe they want to take hunting casually, but if you really want to step up your game, if you really want to engage in a chess game with a mature whitetail buck, especially a public land buck, you're going to have to do some preparation. You're going to have to get your game together before you go afield. I love those people that take it very casually, but the guy that just goes out and he's like, oh, I've got this weekend off work. It's the first week of November. I might as well go out and see what happens. A lot of times they'll kill 1 or 2 good bucks in their lifetime, but it's hard to create that crazy consistency on mature bucks, especially public land bucks, if you're going to take it to that level. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into an interview with my first guest. His name is Austin Culbertson. Austin and I actually met on a public land piece hunting a similar buck. I had shot a buck that I named Ghost, and this was back in 2020, and there's a long 4-year story on Ghost. And I finally caught up to him later on, but I had shot him that year. He survived the shot. He lived through that year. It was too far forward whenever I shot him quartering away, and it was not a lethal shot. And I spent the next 4 years chasing that deer. Well, in the midst of this time, it was probably a couple weeks after I had shot Ghost. I was still in the process of looking for him dead or alive, or doing everything that I could to catch up to the biggest buck that I'd ever shot in my life. And me and Austin had met in the parking lot. I was on my way in to just watch for deer. He was on his way in with his girlfriend at the time, now wife, Danielle, and they were headed in to hunt. And he had respectfully came up to me. We were in the same parking lot. He was like, hey, just check in to see where you were planning on heading. I'm not trying to ask like where you're going, maybe just a general direction so that we don't end up on top of each other. At the time, I didn't really know him, and I was like, oh, you don't have to worry about it, man. I'm going actually 1.5 miles in that direction. I'm going like way long ways from this parking lot, so I shouldn't interfere with your guys' hunt around here. We both kind of took a look at each other and realized how serious of bow hunters we both were. He was like, well, we're planning on going deep the same direction, so maybe we can play off of each other, still trying to like be respectful of each other's spots. So he had opened up first, and he was like, this is actually the buck I'm hunting. And he's been hanging out in this field. And so I was just trying to figure out how to hunt him. And I had told him, I was like, hey man, I'm actually not even hunting right now. I've got my bow with me, but I've got some optics and some glassing stuff. I'm going to be looking for this buck that I shot a couple weeks ago, whether he's dead or alive. Showed him pictures of the buck. And to my surprise, he had also watched the same deer all summer long. So we had kind of coexisted on this property at that time being, and never really ran into each other until that day. Found out we had a lot of mutual friends and went to dinner together that night. And ever since then, we've kind of bounced ideas off of each other. And then we became really close friends. And at that point, he's kind of my first contact whenever I have any sort of situation with a buck, new intel with a big mature deer, any sort of chess game where I need another set of eyes on this, I need another brain into this for game planning, or I need to have another perspective of how to understand something. Austin is my first phone call, and we have hours and hours of long conversations about literally just strategizing mature public land whitetail. Since that time, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've both had a lot of success on public land. Both have killed several of the biggest bucks of our life, and a lot of it has been working together on game planning and executing those plans together. So I'm going to get into that interview with him on kind of how he approaches preparation versus execution, I should say, how he juggles his everyday life versus having success on public land with some really awesome mature bucks. So we're going to jump into that, and then we will discuss more of these topics. So without further ado, here's Austin Culbertson. When it comes to public land hunting and working around other people, working around a work schedule, and life in general, obviously we both have a pretty strong mindset. We do have different hunting styles, but I'd say we align pretty well on we scout, 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 kill. Very rarely hunting, especially in the early season.
Mm-hmm.
And we're more so like preparing and watching deer until we know we can go in for a kill set.
Yeah. Well, early season for me isn't so much about like finding a surprise deer or, like a bonus buck like you might find in the rut. It's for me, I'm trying to narrow down a specific buck and then pattern him and then kill him. So that's just for me, that's how early season works. I'm not just looking for good areas. I'm looking for a specific deer and then how to kill that specific deer.
So when it comes to like, at some point you're like, okay, I need to hunt, or okay, I just need to send it. Like we can't just prepare forever on our gear, prepare forever on making sure a buck does everything. So like how many factors need to align, or like what's your thoughts of a perfect situation to where you're like, okay, tonight I'm going to decide to go hunt?
That's a good question. I think first is you have to decide what you're willing to risk and what you're willing to lose. Like, is that a hunt where it's an all or nothing? Is it I'm going to go in once. If I don't kill him, then I never see this buck again? Or is it kind of a hunt? Is it a deer that's, important enough for you that you're going to slowly encroach into his area? I think that's the first thing. So like wind for me in that regard is number one. I have to have the right wind to be able to hunt him and not think that he's ever going to catch me. So that would be rule number one. If I care about keeping that deer around.
Right. Yeah. So rule number one's wind, and then you're saying like all or nothing. So what type of situation versus, I mean, obviously we would prefer to just get a little closer each night.
Right.
But that's not always the case.
Right. There might be a scenario where in order to hunt that deer, you have to get pretty much right on top of him in his bed. And that might be what I mean is all or nothing, because there's potential that if that deer ever catches your scent, that he might vacate the area for good.
Yeah.
And that's really what I mean by all or nothing. Most scenarios are not that way, but there are a few times where it's such a tight area where you slide in and that's about it.
So say there's so many topics that overlap here.
They kind of bleed in, right?
Yeah.
Because of how much pressure, like we were talking about with like,
Yeah.
how much pressure can a buck take?
Yeah, that, and then
Well, let's
also
go
like
down
your
the
new property stuff.
You're still thinking about preparation here, versus sending it.
So I guess the point of it is,
maybe you could talk about like what you're looking for in preparation. Like, what is it that you're trying when you're Is it so much scouting or preparation as far as like, is that everything, scouting and all of your gear? Is that preparation, or what do you mean by preparation?
yeah, just
Everything.
It's kind of a generalized thing, but like I know guys that every day they have off work, they go hunt, and they like spend a lot of time out in the field, and then they might get an opportunity and not be able to make the shot, or not have the tree stand capabilities that they need to get where they need to get, or make a bad shot, or
maybe even the knowledge of how to work around that because they haven't watched the deer enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
If you were to be more prepared as far as like your knowledge of that deer and his characteristics and the moves he's most likely to make, you can probably better predict him, get ahead of him, kill him, versus just if all you're doing is ever hunting and you're sitting in spots and waiting for deer to come by, you might not have that knowledge of that deer to be able to make a good prediction of what he's going to do.
It's like that guy in the flannel with driving the old beater truck and a bow he's had for 20 years. Maybe he's never changed a string on his bow, right? Totally unprepared, but spends a lot of days out in the field, and he can create an opportunity, but then he doesn't capitalize on it.
Yeah.
And then you got the guy that has a brand new Matthews lift, completely decked out with thousands of dollars worth of gear, all his mobile hunting stuff, brand new.
Yeah, just mint.
First light, just mint.
Yeah.
And he's never out in the field. And so he goes in extra prepared, but doesn't even know the buck that he's hunting,
Hmm.
or know the property or know where he needs to be. And so he's
Well, I would say if
100%
you're really
prepared.
prepared, that probably means you've scouted, but it might mean that your number of like the practicality of it all maybe isn't there because you don't do it enough,
Mhm.
right? It's the guy that researches fishing a ton but never actually gets on the water,
Yes.
And
That's what I'm
so,
talking about.
there is the real world experience. The guy with the flannel and the old bow, he's got the real world experience. He can get out, in and out nice and sneaky and whatever, but he might not have, like you said, the shot capability, the stand capability, or the knowledge necessarily, like the background on a deer. He's just got general woods knowledge versus
Mhm.
the other guy's got all the other side, but may potentially not have the real world experience in the field.
Yeah.
I think being somewhere in between is probably where you need to be.
Yeah.
Like
Right. So do you just want to explain how you try to be that in between?
yeah, because I think I am.
Okay.
For me, I think it comes down kind of down seasonally. Throughout the season, I change a little bit, and I think it's more important probably early in the season to be really prepared as far as your scouting goes. As you bleed into the season, the bucks are changing, so some of that knowledge that you have of a buck during the summer scouting and early season, that kind of goes out the window, and you have to be able to be in the woods, reading sign, and making real life choices right then and there and adapt to what you're seeing. And then late season is even more similar. I mean, you can do a little more scouting and kind of get back to that a little bit in the late season once they get kind of palatable on some sort of late season food source. You can kind of go back to scouting, hunting. But that mid season, I think, is where you have to start kind of just sending it, like we've talked about. That late October into and through November is kind of your time frame where you just kind of need to be in the woods. It's a little less scouting than it is hunting, or a little more hunting versus it is scouting. And then the early season and late season, I do a little more scouting.
So you break it down kind of seasonally for like your take on things, as far as like maybe January through March, you're working on ordering the gear that you want.
Yeah.
And maybe like March through July,
I'm shooting and I'm
shooting and looking for bucks.
watching deer. Yeah.
And then like maybe July to September, you're really narrowing down like,
Yep. I've hopefully by then found my buck that I want to chase. I'm watching him on, as many occasions as I can that I feel like it's necessary.
mhm,
And then kind of making a plan from there. And then knowing that come season, there will be adjustments that have to be made, but having as much information about that deer as possible can only benefit me.
right.
Right? Like knowing where, if he gets bumped, say you watch him get bumped by a hiker or something like that, where does he go? Which way does he run? Which way does he walk on what wind?
Mm.
Those are all important things I'm looking at. Where does he bed on certain winds in the summertime? Because I can then make those adjustments for the changing wind or the how he gets pushed in season to kill him. So that's why I think it's important. It's not just about finding a deer, but it's about finding those little things about that specific deer that are going to give you the edge.
So I see a mistake a lot of times, that maybe not a mistake, but a tendency that I see a lot of times of hunters is they get as prepared as they can be.
Mhm.
They've got a buck pattern. They know what he does on a certain situation. They've got all their gear ready. And then they show up and something's not perfect. Somebody else has showed up to that spot. The wind's not right. The weather's not right. The buck doesn't show up for 3 days. How do you combat against that in that situation? Because I see a lot of people give up on that mission that they've prepared for all year.
Right. They kind of spin out
Yeah.
prematurely.
Absolutely.
I think first things first, you got to remember it's a live animal.
Mm.
And there's going to be
Just
things
like
that
fishing.
change. Yeah, it's a live animal.
Yeah.
And they have a brain and they have a mind of their own. So they're gonna they'll go do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And as much as you think you know them, you can't put them in a box.
Yes.
Because I've been guilty of that. Putting deer in a box, thinking this is the only place they could possibly be, because that's all I've ever seen them do, and never thinking outside the box and going, where else could he be or what else could he be doing? I think to combat that, like you said, and not spin out, it might just be back off the area, take a day to scout, re-scout that deer.
On that day that it's not perfect, you're going to do something towards scouting.
Yes. I'm not going to go in there when I don't know where he is or what he's doing. I have no idea, the last thing I want to do is try to slide in there, make some sneaky move, and then I bust him. So I would take that opportunity to scout him. You might find exactly what he's doing. He might be even easier to kill than he was before with whatever you find.
And by scouting, you don't mean go in and hang a set hunting.
No.
You mean
More of an observation sit.
either observation sit or boots on the ground per se.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Right. I'm not going to go throw a Hail Mary that early on a deer.
Right. Talking to Austin was very eye-opening on how he separates preparation versus execution. And his main idea to that, and I would say mine aligns to this as well, or to the best of my ability, is delegating certain times of the year to certain types of preparation. And so maybe early in the season, he's working on his bow and his gear and his setup and practicing maybe some new mobile hunting tactics that he wants to do. Spring and summertime is going to be studying a specific target buck, not just like a property or an area to where he's stumbling upon like some strange deer, but an actual specific deer and how he will get that deer killed, what he does on different winds, what he does in different weather situations, moon phases, what his tolerances are. So really studying that target buck to try and make his early season most effective. And then one of my favorite topics that we will get into with Austin later on in this podcast series is going to be rut hunting and some of the things that he has studied to make his rut hunting on public land as effective as anybody that I've ever met. So really awesome to hear from Austin on that, how he delegates his time different times of the year to create his preparation. And then when it is time to hunt, he is ready to hunt and he doesn't have to be preparing the whole time. He's ready to go in and kill. So super awesome to hear from Austin on that. A couple other people that I think are some of the most efficient mobile hunters and public land hunters that I know is one, Chris Hammond, and two, my cameraman, Dylan Harriman. Chris is an awesome guy, and he is on the ASA tour in the professional class. Me and him shoot and compete against each other a lot, and we've grown really close over the last couple years. He's actually based out of Oklahoma and is more of a mature buck killer than I ever knew until very recently on his history of being just a consistent killer. He's killed some absolute giants for the Southwest and has quite a bit of experience in hunting the Midwest and other states and other situations as well, and is also getting into some more like Western hunting recently with antelope and mule deer and that type of thing. Absolute phenomenal shot, absolute crazy great mindset when it comes to understanding how a big buck thinks. I think that's a really important factor into these situations is, understanding the psychology, what a big buck's capable of, and understanding, like Austin said, not boxing a whitetail into a certain pattern or into a certain mindset that might hold you back from hunting him properly. So each deer has his own personality. Each deer has his own tendencies, whether they're like a lazy or active deer. Chris is really good about figuring out that deer's personality and capitalizing on his weak points because of that. We will get into interviewing Chris in some of these later podcasts and episodes and how he has really mastered hunting like Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, the Southwest, dealing with baiting, dealing with hogs, dealing with high pressure rifle seasons, all of those sorts of situations, and still capitalizing every single year on mature bucks. So it'll be super awesome to hear from Chris. The other guest that I'm going to have is Dylan Harriman. Dylan is a young guy. I believe he's 21 or 22 now. And he's been my cameraman for the last few years. And he has grown into one of the best hunters that I've ever met in my life. At this point, I almost feel like the weak point in the tree whenever I'm hunting with him. And I've watched Dylan grow in the last 3 years from pretty beginner status, but having a burning passion for whitetail to now being the most efficient killer that I've ever met in my life. And what I mean by that is I run as heavy of a schedule as I possibly can, filming, hunting public, going state to state, as much as I can afford to do every year. We are doing it, and he's right by my side for every minute of it, filming it and doing a phenomenal job of helping me game plan, helping me spot animals, helping me understand like a property and stuff. We really put our heads together on all that. There are some times that we come home and we work and we take a week off. I make a living from building fence. I have a fence company here in Missouri. And so last year specifically, we took a week off between two hunts in October, in the first week of November, actually, to regather, take a break at home, build some fences, make some money. And in that time period, we were building fences, mid morning till dark. And then Dylan had the opportunity to take a few days and go from daylight till 10 a.m. to go hunt and scout and try to capitalize as much as he could off of 3 days. And what did he do with those 3 days? He killed a 186-inch typical 12 point on public land in between my schedule, a deer that he'd never seen in his life, and a deer that ended up being a 7.5-year-old monster that several people knew about and were hunting and were never able to capitalize on. So Dylan has become one of the most efficient hunters. That's not the only time he's done that. He's done it several times throughout my hunting seasons, where he'll have a couple days and he's able to really get on a buck quick and capitalize on it in only a couple days. So super excited to hear from Dylan. He's taught me so much about vocalizations in the rut, rattling, grunting, and we've had a lot of success this last year in some of the most phenomenal hunts that I've ever had in my life because of him teaching me those things. So that'll be another one of our guests. The last one of my guests is going to be a special episode where I'm going to be joined by Levi Morgan. And I don't think I need to say much about his resume because he is one of the greatest archers of all times. And in my book, one of the greatest hunters of all times. He cut his teeth on public land, hunting the same way that me and Dylan do. And, our focus of this podcast is painting public, and that's what he really grew up on. And he has worked hard enough and became the best at enough things to where he has built an empire and a TV show to where he is able to hunt some of the best places in the U.S. now. So really coming from public land to that and having all those sorts of different experiences, we're going to have a special episode where we discuss kind of the seriousness and capabilities of a whitetail. I had an opportunity to go down and film Levi for a couple days in Mississippi, and we were mobile hunting, and I was super excited to learn from him more than anything and be able to film him on one of the properties that he probably loves to hunt the most for whitetail. And I learned pretty quickly that our processes, even for his private land in that situation versus the public land in the Midwest that I was hunting, kind of our approach on mobile hunting and taking stuff to a really high level of seriousness lined up a lot more than I expected. So I'm super excited to talk to Levi about taking a big buck seriously on what he's capable of as far as playing the wind, scent control, what a buck will do to avoid people pressure, and just kind of every single factor that you can do in order to get the upper hand on this buck, or better yet, not let the buck get an upper hand on you. So that'll be a really awesome episode to discuss with him. That is going to be our guest for this podcast series. I tried to pick a handful of the best resources that I have, people that I rely on to help me game plan and trust with the information that I give them for hunting mature whitetail. And then we are going to discuss a lot of different topics in that. So that being said, I'm going to go over the podcast list that we have here. So podcast 2 is going to be what we call an open canvas. So this is, we're going to be discussing like approaching a new state, approaching a new property, approaching somewhere that you have never been to in your life. And I'm going to discuss with each person and also talk about kind of my approach on what we do first and how we take this absolute load of information when approaching a new state and narrow it down almost to a single tree, and narrowing that down to a specific buck or a specific kill or a specific layout of property that we are wanting or targeting. So super excited for that. That is going to be one of the important bases for how we approach public, because the new version of bow hunting, the new version of public land hunting, the new version of mobile hunting is going to start a lot with map studies, start a lot with e-scouting, start a lot with information and knowledge before you ever put boots on the ground. I won't say we're past the point of the classic hunting style, but if you're going to approach public land and have a high success rate and really get ahead of the game and get ahead of everybody that you're competing with in this industry and fad of public land, it's becoming very popular in the past few years, then you're going to have some of those resources and knowledge before you put boots on the ground in certain areas. So we're going to be talking a lot about that approach to things and how we prepare ourselves before we even step foot on a property. So that will be a really good topic. Next topic we have is going to be food sources versus bucks' personalities. And that may sound like something that has nothing to do with each other, but when we really discuss it and break it down and talk about it, there's a lot of different bucks personalities out there. And what I mean by personality is there's bucks that have different food source preferences. There's deer that prefer natural browses. There's deer that prefer acorn certain times of the year. There's certain deer that prefer corn over beans, or maybe even some other type of food source over top of crops when it comes to the Midwest. And then we're also going to discuss that with Chris Hammond and kind of how he deals with competing against neighbors as far as like everybody's baiting there. If you're not baiting, then you're behind on your deer, and you're not going to keep up with the neighbors that are baiting. So it's kind of a staple how he sets that up on food sources to kind of capture each and every buck personality. Also, what I'm talking about when it comes to buck personalities is how much they travel. There's a lot of bucks that I've personally witnessed that are very nomadic. There's bucks that are very homebodies, where they stay, maybe in a 60 or 100 acre patch and almost never leave that, even in the rut. And then there's deer that travel miles and miles and miles, even in the early season, without much incentive at all, other than that's how they live their life. So every animal is a live animal. Every animal is making its own decisions, and every animal is free to do what he wants and chase the personality that he wants. So that'll be a really good topic. Next topic will be how mobile hunting has taught us to hunt and how mobile hunting has created success. So with this being a Trophyline series, every single one of the hunters that I'll be interviewing, Dylan, Chris Hammond, Austin Culbertson, Levi Morgan, have found the most success and understood deer to a far deeper level, how they travel, how they work, what they do outside of just a set permanent tree stand. By getting mobile in discovering different places of property, discovering different places that deer use, and most of all, especially when dealing with a mature public land whitetail, not letting that buck pattern you. and that is a far more extreme thing than I ever realized before I started mobile hunting. Is, one or two sits in a permanent set, and that buck may have an upper hand on you or ace up his sleeve that you don't even realize. He could have J-hooked you and caught your wind. He could have caught visual of you or passed through without you knowing it. Or maybe he even busted you out of that tree. Well, now he has the knowledge of where that stand was and where that tree was. But if you're in a different tree every single day, there is no patterning you. There's only the unpredictability of you're somewhere else than where you were last time. So that gives you a big upper hand when it comes to hunting these mature public land bucks that, they reach that age that they on public land because of how good they are. If they weren't that good, they would die early. So really important on mobile hunting, and a lot of different experiences from each one of us on that. So super excited to discuss that. The next one is going to be hunting bedding areas. A lot of discrepancy when it comes to bedding areas. There's a lot of different styles of bed hunting. There's a lot of different takes on bed hunting, whether it's, a good tactic, a bad tactic, whether a buck has even a consistent enough bed or beds or bedding area to hunt a bedding area successfully. So we're going to be talking more about specific experiences with Dylan and Austin, especially on hunting bucks in their bedding areas on public land. It's a tough tactic, but when done right, it's a very successful tactic. And most of us have killed most of our public land bucks in bedding areas or in their specific bed. And so we're going to be talking about that a lot, and kind of what our take is on the psychological side of that with the bucks. So that'll be a great topic. Next one is going to be October lull, whether it does exist or doesn't exist, and acorns, kind of getting into the first 2 weeks of October. That's going to be a really good podcast because Chris and Austin actually prefer that time of year. They've had a lot of success in the first couple weeks of October, a lot of success over acorns, a lot of success in that time that can be really difficult to locate a buck or get a buck moving in the daylight. So I learned a lot from both Chris and Austin because I personally struggle with the first 2 weeks of October. I have killed some mature bucks in that time period. It's just been really tough for me, and it seems like the time that I work the hardest and spin my wheels the most. And so I was able to learn a lot from Chris and Austin both. Austin in the Midwest and similar stuff to what I'm hunting. Chris more in the Southwest, and deer transitioning from feeders or bait to acorns and natural food. So that creates a whole mix up and movement of things. And we're going to talk about kind of keeping up with that movement as you're hunting and still being able to capitalize that, because it's a lot to handle at once. And so super excited to hear from those guys on that. Next couple topics, we're going to talk about trail cameras. We're going to talk all things trail cameras. We're going to talk new laws going into effect in different states about trail cameras. We're going to talk about how useful trail cameras can be and how effective they can be when used right. And then we're also going to talk about how debilitating cameras can really be. Trail cameras can be one of the worst things for a hunter if used improperly. A lot of people that slip into the rut of relying only on cameras and only hunting whenever their cameras are active, and only thinking that there is a mature buck around if they have a camera picture of them. So we're going to talk about our success outside of trail cameras, and then also our success with trail cameras, and how we try to keep ourselves from slipping into that rut of only relying on that for our hunting tactics. Last but not least, and I think this is going to be one of my favorite episodes of the whole podcast series, is one that we're going to call Join the Chaos, which is talking about I would say tactics for rut hunting that I've never heard of or are kind of not the norm. So um, we're gonna be we're gonna be talking about vocalizations. We're gonna be talking about um, different ways that Austin, Dylan, Chris, and myself have learned to uh, hunt the rut differently to really capitalize on some mature bucks. And so there's going to be a lot of topics. I'm super excited for Austin's take on it and how he plays the wind a super unconventional way on public land and has some of the craziest hunts I've ever seen before. We're going to be talking to Dylan a lot on vocalizations. I've learned so much from him and had some of my biggest successes because of what I learned from him and how he truly understands how deer communicate in the rut, whether that's rattling, snort wheezing, grunting, um, and the vocalizations. And when Dylan when Dylan calls, he's truly talking to the deer, and it is impressive how much of a language that truly is, and not just random noises that I feel like more or less I perceived as that in the rut, just being more random instead of a specific language that they're using amongst each other. So, super excited to talk about that. I'm going to be talking a lot about how I struggled in the rut for a couple years. And then last year, I've had a lot of success in the rut and what changes I made to make that happen whenever it comes to hunting public land. And a lot of that is because of the amount of pressure that comes into the woods during that time of year. Everybody loves the rut. Everybody wants to hunt whitetail in the rut. A lot of people only hunt the rut for bow hunting or rifle hunting, either way. So that end of October, beginning of November, that's when everybody takes their vacation. They go on their rut hunt, they go out of state, or they go to hunting camp. It's a magical time and it can be a very frustrating time for public land hunters with how many people are around. So I kind of go into how I've combated that and how it's been frustrating for years. And then also how getting down, staying mobile, and not stop moving until I found the nucleus of the deer has created my success in the last year on joining the chaos, quite literally. So, a lot less about patterning and being cautious and being like a ninja, and more about getting in the middle of it and joining the chaos. So, that's going to be our last topic of this series. We're going to be calling Painting Public. And so, yeah, hope you guys enjoy it and hope you guys tune in to each and every episode. We're going to be playing this a lot different than most podcasts. Instead of doing like a guest base, like this podcast is going to be with Austin Culbertson. It's going to be more topic related podcast. I'm going to discuss a topic and then I'm going to pull interviews, 10 to 20 minute interviews from each person and their specialty on that topic to where we stay on topic through that whole time. You get a lot of different perspectives of that specific topic. You get a lot of different views of different tactics that they use for that specific topic to where we have a very thorough understanding from a lot of different killers on these topics that they're applying to public land mature buck, and how they're capitalizing on that. So stay tuned and yeah, like and subscribe so you can keep up with it. So super excited for this series. Hope you guys enjoy it.